How are we doing? So my name is Max, and I'm here today to talk to you about what I call the life of data. It's basically the amazing world that we live in, and how you can leverage certain data-driven ideas to get much more out of it, out of business, out of life in general. So I'd like to start with this. I don't know how many of you guys have seen this movie, Limitless? Right, a few people. So I guess some of you know what it's about. It's about this dude who is actually a total loser. His life is shit. He doesn't have a job, doesn't have money, doesn't have a girlfriend, and then all of a sudden he gets this medicine, a pill, which makes him think 100 times faster, 100 times better. So there's this medicine, and suddenly he realizes things that are in his brain, but he doesn't, he didn't have access to them, and now he does. And he becomes a really successful investment banker, and then, it's a movie, so there's a lot of, there's trouble, there are girls, actually it appears that there are side effects to this medicine. So he gets in trouble. And basically, the idea of the story is that, we have all the data in our brain, but we can't access it because the connections in our brain are prejudiced and are compromised. So this guy uses the pill, and he actually has access to the data in his brain and makes the connections much more efficiently. It's not really magic, right? The data is out there. It's really working with that data. When Apple introduced the iPhone, a lot of people, were making all kinds of magic connotations about it. And Steve Jobs actually once said himself that it's not magic. It's just a lot of data beautifully visualized. And I guess what I want to talk about today is how if we use our brains as iPhones, we really could leverage many more achievements with that. So if you think about how would the society that we live in today, how would people have thought about it 200 years ago? They probably would have thought that we were totally crazy with the way we access and handle information. I remember when I was a kid, once I was with my dad. We were driving in his car and listening to Beethoven, and he said, imagine you would put the guy in the back seat of the car. He would probably lose his mind. He'll go crazy, because that's the concept that you travel in a vehicle at a high speed and listen to music, to orchestral music. Just 200 years ago, that would have been unimaginable. Right now, we are way beyond that with Spotify and whatnot. So the chances are very big that not only 200 years from now, but actually much sooner, the world will be, well, like that. You will have people, androids, I guess, who would be very, very good at working with data. And we'll be all like him, probably with his looks, but with the technology of the androids. And most importantly, without drugs, because that's just not the way. That's not the way you want to do it. So today, I have basically a few ideas that I want to share. Some of them are my own. Most of them I have from people who are way smarter than me, about how to try, get comfortable, and efficient with dealing with a lot of data. So basically, four main concepts that I want to touch briefly. It's failure, sharing of information, accessing the right information at the right time, which like data-driven ideas, and thinking in a strategic way. I guess one could ask, like for example, my mother, she's that kind of person. She doesn't like the fact that things are getting out of control, are becoming more complicated. And you could, of course, always ask the question, why do you need to have that data-driven approach to things? I guess the main answer is because the amount of data, as we all know it, is expanding so quickly that we really have to teach ourselves new techniques in dealing with the data. I put there doubling annually. I'm not sure. I think it's not annually. It's like once or every 2 or 3 years. Probably someone knows better than I do. But the amount of information on the internet is vastly expanding. And it's all about getting that competitive edge, which you can really do by adopting some other techniques. So concept number one, right, failure, which for me, and it took me some time to get there, is really the process of dealing with data, iterations, which every time you become better in dealing with the information that surrounds you. The cool thing about failure is that it has a max function, right? So imagine if you do 4 things, and then or 5 things, right, and 4 things go wrong and 1 thing goes right. The success of that 1 thing that goes right is not the average of all the 5 tries, right? You get the maximum outcome of that 1 go. So basically, it's pretty simple. You basically have to try as often as you can, and every time you win big time, right? You hit the jackpot. it's like that in, in life and business. So the good thing about business right now is that a lot of the methodologies that were used in software are entering the business world. This year has seen the publication of a book by Eric Ries called The Lean Startup, where he basically takes lean software development ideas into the business world. I'm sure many of you know the book or have read it. And it's really, it's really the data methods that have been used in software development are now more and more at the basis of really successful business. I guess the key concept is very simple, right? It's more and shorter iterations, and you get validated learning. Sometimes it's tricky to implement that in life. I want to tell you about 2 stories of my own. So bad failure. What we see here is a kid that's getting bullied. I didn't get bullied, really, at school, but I had this one experience where we were graduating from elementary school, and we had this musical. Like the teachers, they like, basically to make a fool out of you. So you have to do this musical in front of your parents and brothers and sisters. So we were in this big room. We practiced and rehearsed a lot, and I had to do a solo, the singing solo, first and for now also last one in my life. So the chorus stopped singing, and I went out, and the refrain went okay, and then I was so nervous, I guess, that when I had to sing the next part, I repeated the refrain. And the room was, like this, and everyone started laughing and pointing fingers. My parents were sitting, with the hands in front of their mouth. And I ran away. I went in the back, and I probably cried or something. And bad failure. I didn't learn much. The only thing that I really learned is that I don't want to be, in front of people, that I can't sing, that, I'm a fool, that girls won't like me, that kind of stuff. You don't really learn anything out of that, right? 12 years later, I had one of my first really good learning experiences. So I don't know this girl, and the one that I want to talk about is a much prettier one than this one. But I was in Rome in the metro, and back then I was in love with one girl. We just saw each other. She lived at the other side of the world, and then suddenly in Rome, there I am, and I see this girl in the train. It's not her, but one that really looks like her. Probably she was even prettier. So she gets off in a stop where I don't have to leave, and I'm like, hey, I'm gonna go, go have a try. So I run after her at the stairs. Out of breath, I confront her and I ask her, okay, what's your number? And she goes like, go fuck yourself, right? So the good thing about that experience is that was probably for me one of the first times that I really thought like, hey, this is a fuck up, but it's a good one because I learned, you learn how to deal with rejection. You learn how to go after stuff that that is not very obvious. And I've done it several times after that, and the outcome was better. So I guess the idea is that you can really validate upon your failure, and it's a good thing I noticed for myself to start doing that with every single interaction in life. So basically, this was for me the case also in business. I'm right now something of a serial entrepreneur. So this first company that you see, that's a company that I founded in the Netherlands a few years ago, sold it this year. It's been doing pretty well. It's a law firm, online legal services. Then some time ago, about a year ago, I co-founded an incubator for space transport businesses in Holland. Totally crazy idea. Failure pretty much still exists, but we're just having parties and stuff like this. Nothing's really happening there. It's too early. It's not there. It's too expensive. It's too uncertain. But I guess that whether it's successful or it's unsuccessful, and I'll probably have hopefully both, many of both in the future. You basically always have the same thing, right? It's about trying as often as you can and learning as much as you can from every try. So I guess if we really look at at failure and concluding a failure, it's really good things just don't happen at once. So I've taught myself to be very conscious about trying and trying again and learning stuff. There are very good examples of people who have done the same. So this is Steve Jobs a few years ago when he presented the first phone, the first Apple phone, which was basically a Motorola phone where you could play iTunes and you could store like up to 100 songs in it. Like, no one bought it for a reason, right? Because it doesn't make any sense. 2 years later, they came with the iPhone. So back then, you could have looked at this guy and a very successful software company and everything, and could have laughed at him. But they probably learned a lot. And maybe, who knows? Maybe their whole idea was to not even put a successful product on the market, but just learn something about how the market reacts to an Apple phone. The same thing with Angry Birds, right? This is a small Finnish company, or used to be a small Finnish company, Rovio. They actually made 52 games before they made Angry Birds. So, you could have imagined what the atmosphere was when they were making the 50th or 51st product and it was not working, right? And everyone's like, well, losers, you got to be in Silicon Valley, Finland's never going to work. Then they came with Angry Birds, and the rest is history. It's really, good things don't happen at once. So part number 2, after failure, if you're used to failure, my experience is you can actually start sharing in a very meaningful way. So dealing with data, or basically producing data and pushing it out there and analyzing what happens with it in a meaningful way. Typo, success is with 2 S's. So the number of prerequisites for success is sharing, right? I wanted to put a sharing button over there, but I couldn't find one, so it's a like button. But like nowadays, when you share, you also get likes. So that's basically the main concept. This is Sergey Brin here, and the guy, of course, made Google. He was born in the same city as I was born in, and he became like really, really great with Google. One of the cool stories that I heard about Sergey is that he's considered by the people who know him as someone who's very, very good at learning information all the time. So the story is that when he hires people for Google, he allocates 20 minutes for the interview, and you can imagine like these people that get there, they probably pass already many, many rounds before they actually get interviewed by him. And of these 20 minutes, he needs like 2 or 3 minutes to understand whether he's going to hire the person or not. But he never walks away, like, for example, some people do. Steve Jobs famously walked away in interviews with staff that he found foolish. Sergey Brin actually stays in the room and listens to the person. He makes it a point to learn at least one good thing from that person. So when he walks away, he can say, I learned something great from this person. And this is, I guess, part of the reason that he is who he is. Really, great, someone who's very good at learning. So the thing is that with the brain, it's really like a muscle. I noticed that with myself. When if I stop thinking for a day, just hang on Facebook or something, it becomes more difficult to generate ideas or to validate ideas. It's like with your legs, right? If you don't walk, if you stay in bed all day, and you do that for a month, then you won't be able to walk. You become, a couch potato, right? So it's the same with your brain. You got to practice. You got to exercise. Nowadays, it's really easy to do that. I've found many amazing people via Google Plus, Twitter, less degree Facebook, I guess, because you usually know them already or you're a stalker. But it's very easy, like especially now with Google Plus. It's so easy to find information. You can actually search for stuff that interests you and you see people who post about it, and you can follow them. It's really amazing. So I guess the conclusion is that you got to share a lot. You got to share a lot of information. I used to be very active in the legal industry. I'm a lawyer by origin, and there it's all about secrets and NDAs, and I learned to get over that. Sometimes I get in trouble. I actually got in trouble yesterday with one of my business partners. He was yelling at me because I told some people things that I shouldn't have told them. But I'm like, hey. For me, it's important to share, and ultimately, in the long run, you always get more successful if you share. So imagine you're very good at failing and you're very good at sharing stuff. How do you actually go about when you have to work with big amounts of information? Because that's where a lot of like high-scale mistakes are made, if you look at it. So you're very good at sharing. You start business, you start sharing with people. Basically, this is once again the concept of the lean startup, which originally comes from software development or from engineering in general. Is that you basically do these build, measure, learn loops, which you have to iterate as often as you can. And whatever you do, the most important thing is to get a minimal version out of it out there, and have people interact with it and measure very, very well. If you could really with an Excel sheet, just putting in what people say to actually analyze what is happening. If you look up on the internet, or if you look it up on the book that Eric Ries wrote, you'll see all these beautiful graphs on how you develop products and how you actually get to product market fit, which is where your product is successful in the shortest possible way. The good thing about right now is the time that we live in. It's so exciting that you can actually set up a business. I've done this myself at least once, I guess, without really anything. You can get yourself Google spreadsheets. You can give a lot of people access to those spreadsheets. You can make a page out of that. And you can have actually people telling you or even buying from you without really investing anything, as long as you have an interesting proposition. If it's not, you'll find out in that way. There is this tool called Unbounce, which I haven't used actually yet, but I'm planning to with one of the projects that I'm working now, where you can actually test landing pages with people and measure how you can achieve conversion rates with a product depending on the color that you use, or on the font that you use, or on the content that you put in it. Stuff costs almost nothing, or actually sometimes it's even free, like Google, and you can really get a business to start earning money online, and having a company before you actually invest in an office or in salaries and whatever else we're used to. Some interesting examples of people that were really good at leveraging data to make their business successful. So these guys are a company called Uber. They're in San Francisco, and they developed this app for cabs, right? So it's an app for your iPhone. You basically are on the street somewhere. You click a button, you tap on the screen, and the company knows that you're there and you want a cab, and it's actually connected to your bank account, so it automatically, or credit card, it automatically takes the money from your card. Really, really easy, hassle-free way of getting a cab. These guys are really, really successful nowadays, and one of the reasons for that is that they're actually, so they're data junkies, right? They try to get in as much data as they can to see why and how people order cabs. So one of the things that they did in the San Francisco Bay Area, they took the crime statistics, specifically for Oakland, which is part of San Francisco on the other side of the bay, and they found out through actually going through crime statistics and plotting them together with the usage statistics of Uber is that they found out that in places where there was a lot of prostitution going on, and especially on certain evenings, they're more likely to get cab rides, which might sound like a logical conclusion, I guess, because I guess if you're going to the hookers, you probably end up taking a taxi. But it's great to know that kind of stuff, right? It's great to see that kind of stuff because they can actually leverage more taxis at that point. It's the kind of information you would never find out if you don't analyze it. And really, the success of their company, they're doing very good now. They're in San Francisco and New York, and probably going to expand to many more cities. Is based to a large degree on the fact that they really analyze their business process in a very, very rich, data-rich way. Another example, this is something more out of my own life. One of the things that my girlfriend is doing right now is she's selling art event marketing to corporate sponsors. So they're organizing this event next year in New York in the Museum of Modern Art, which is like the biggest museum marketing thing. So marketers from art institutions come together to talk about how to sell their museums. And the question is, who is going to sponsor that, right? And what we're basically doing right now is we're analyzing all the art impressions, so the art exposure moments that all kinds of companies, including HTC or Samsung, have, to find out why they actually sponsor art, or why do they connect with paintings or with other artworks in their marketing. And once we have that information, it will be much more easy to actually call them up and say, hey, listen, what do you think about, you have like a painting of Picasso in one of your TV ads. Why don't you just be there and sponsor that museum? Because then you have, you can really show that you're part of that. It's already proving much more successful than just calling companies and saying like, hey, this is a big deal, you better sponsor it. So like a very simple thing, actually, not even online. I guess what I would like to conclude with is that you got to make stuff measurable. For example, when I drive like really old cars, usually like Volvos, and I have these spreadsheets. Probably I'm a nerd, but of all the different models and all the different ones that are for sale here in Bulgaria or in the Netherlands, where I used to buy my cars, and it really gives me a much better idea. For example, I found out that in certain parts of the Netherlands, there are many more, for some reason, cars that I like. So next time I'm going to look for a car, it's probably going to be there. Why? I don't know, but it really is the case, and analyzing data really helps me get there. So, not to bore you, the fourth part, strategy. This is where it actually very often goes wrong, right? A lot of data can mean a lot of misleading. Mark Twain famously said once, you have lies, you have damn lies, and you have statistics. It was actually not his quote. They say good artists copy, great artists steal. He stole, because the quote is actually by Benjamin Disraeli, who was a British prime minister back then. I guess what the guys were trying to say is that if data can really cause you to take wrong decisions in life or in politics or in business, and the key is to have a strategy on where you're actually going before the data overflows you like a sea, and you basically don't know what you're doing. Unfortunately, it happens, right? It happens a lot, and it happens sometimes with very big companies. So these are two names that, like 20 years ago, when I was a kid, those were like the names in photography, right? It was Kodak, and Polaroid was still, I guess, pretty cool back then. I found it cool at least. These companies, they practically don't exist anymore. They were very successful. Everything went well, actually, until they lost their market to companies they never would expect, to actually beat them out of the business, which was, digital photography, and in the end, mobile phones. So this is a concept which is dealt with in a great book that I guess many of you know, The Innovator's Dilemma by Clayton Christensen. It basically means that when you're growing your business or whatever it is that you do, you take a lot of indicators into account, and if you focus too much on them, like I guess Kodak was competing with Fuji or Konica Minolta or some other photo company, or Canon or Nikon, they didn't actually see the fact that the danger comes from digital devices, from mobile phones, and that really cost them their business. So a lot of data doesn't mean good decisions automatically. Same thing with the mess that's going on right now. I guess there is a lot of information. If you go back to the EU statistics website, Eurostat, they know so much, about that beach resort that is called Greece, or about the whole European economy. So they cannot figure it out because they don't seem to be acting on the data that they have, which is a shame. The problem with dealing with data is twofold. So you have vanity metrics, which is a very big problem actually, and lack of strategy. Vanity metrics is what you see over here. This is a visualization of the trips that President Obama made when he was still running for presidency. It's a very beautiful report, but it doesn't really give you any information except that it's just pleasing to the eye. You can see how many days he was at home or something, which doesn't really mean, because for me that would be very little, but I guess if you're running for the presidency, that's a lot. So that's a very distorted piece of information. You can see that his carbon outprint was the same of that of 2 Hummers or whatever, which once again doesn't really give you any information apart from the fact that it's like nice to know and it's a cool way to visualize stuff. Unfortunately, I'm going to touch on that a little later. We are very often confronted in life with people that actually demand vanity metrics from us. They demand to see snapshots of things that we're doing and base their decisions on those snapshots. So we are required to provide snapshots instead of really thinking in a data-driven way. I guess what I mean by that is the following. So imagine, when you're setting up a business, you desperately need money very often, right? And if you go to the bank, you'll find yourself, making documents, like a business plan, which very often is really something you should not do without at least analyzing some stuff. But it's a prerequisite, right? The bank clerk will not accept your loan application if you don't have a business plan. Very often they really want to see that you've existed for 2 or 3 years before they say like, oh, it's fundable. I guess that even worse is that venture capitalists or angel investors have that very often. The first 2 investors in my business, they had exactly that mentality on that T-shirt. Like, oh, I don't actually understand it. Fuck it, I'm going to give money. And it's you're really happy when it happens, but it brings you in trouble later on. Specifically in my case, these investors, they wanted to see like a Gantt chart. I guess they read it in some book that that you have to see a Gantt chart, like a progress chart of all the tasks and projects for the first year. So we just had an idea, and they wanted to see this whole project forecast for the whole year. So I was 2 days I was building this Gantt chart, and then they had a look at it for like 1 minute. They basically looked at all the months had been filled in, and they were like, yeah, cool, sure, here you go, here's money. It gets you in trouble, and the problem is that because people around you ask for this kind of stuff from you all the time, you actually get incentivized to think that you must have this Gantt chart or this report for your bank, and that actually, if you get past that step, you actually are successful. You're actually getting to the next step, which in reality doesn't happen that way. Customers are like that exactly as well. They they want you to have an office, and they want you to have a suit or business cards or all kinds of other stuff, which doesn't mean you're a great company, but we have this perception that that is what customers want. That's what vanity metrics, and you've got to be very careful of that in life. The strategy problem is really something that Bill Gates very beautifully called, that we tend to overestimate short-term and underestimate long-term. So if you look, for example, at the investment business that I'm, as of recently getting into, people really look a lot at what's going to happen in the next 3 years, and look very little at what's going to happen in the next 10 years. So a lot of the decisions that are being made, you know, they take 3 years into account, whereas you know, the long-term benefits that are possible are not really realized. You see that, for example, if you look at investments, you see that, for example, a lot in Bulgaria right now. Bulgaria has, you know, historically an overvalued real estate market, so the real estate is always basically like, what's the right word? It's basically always overvalued here. So the fact that, you know, that you have these crashes like in 2008, 2009, it's very normal. It's probably going to happen again in a few years. But people see that and they stop investing, whereas like in the long term, it actually makes a lot of sense to invest in property here. That's just to give you a very brief example of, you know, what they call macro myopia. This is one guy that is, you know, famous for doing it very well. Warren Buffett, you know, a lot of people don't like him, but he is actually, so the guy's like really, really successful as an investor. He's like the richest or the second richest person in the world. And his whole strategy is basically to be very conservative on risk. So he only invests like in a few industries and basically only in the United States. He barely has investments outside of the United States. And, you know, there's very little that can go wrong there. You know, only existing businesses that have track record. And, you know, and then he takes basically the qualifier for what he's doing is the long term, right? So he looks at a business and he says, like, if this is going to be around for another 20 years, like Apple right now, you know, it's pretty safe to put money in Apple. You know, 20 years from now, hell, at least even if you lose, it won't be that much, right? And he does it like 100 times, and that's how you earn money. That is strategy. You know, it takes balls of steel, I guess, to go through these moments where things are going down. You know, very famously, if you look at how the Dow Jones index has performed over the last 30 years on the New York Stock Exchange, you'll see that the 1987 crash, which is like everyone knows about it, there are books written about it, there are movies written about Wall Street, basically. You know, people have famously committed suicide about it. But if you look at the performance of the stock exchange over the last 30, 40 years, 1987 is like a tiny blip there. You know, there's like, it doesn't, if you had a lot of money, you know, in companies back before that, and you got it out 10 years later, you would certainly not have noticed 1987. But people have a, you know, we as people have a physical, you know, issue with thinking long term. So that's where it goes wrong. He doesn't have that. That's why he's very rich. That's the story. Kodak and Polaroid, so they went down because they couldn't figure that out, right? So they probably started panicking. I don't know the story exactly. Kodak went bankrupt this year. It still exists, but they're just producing photo paper under a different name even, I think. They couldn't figure it out. They started panicking, probably took a lot of wrong decisions, probably decided to buy some digital companies that weren't that successful, and the rest is history. They don't exist. Like I already said, there are on political level, you have these issues as well. Bulgaria is getting ripe for a lot of strategic projects. Basically, everything still has to be done in this country. You have to build the roads and, you know, the infrastructure. But it's very difficult to convince people to do that because the place has a bad name, because things have been going badly here every now and then. So that's the kind of issues you're faced even on such a high level. So I guess when you have to deal with a lot of data, you really have to make sure that you know what you're measuring and you know how you're measuring it, and doing it in such a way that it actually gives you insights that you wouldn't get otherwise. So that's pretty much what I wanted to tell today. I'm still very much myself in the process of learning this, but I do notice that I get much more successful when I apply these practices to the businesses that I'm running or that I'm setting up. So the thing is, this is like the last touch that I wanted to do today. It's sometimes very difficult to live such a life, you know, because you actually, like I said with vanity metrics, you are forced by people to believe things or to do things, you know, simply by pressure that you shouldn't actually do, especially if you're in business, you know, because in the end of the day, you know, everyone tells you how to do it, and then when they walk away, you're in the shit, you know. There are some very simple ideas on how to get comfortable with that. This guy over here, I met him this summer. He's right now actually a pretty you know, growing blogger. He used to be he's a serial entrepreneur. He's a financial commentator. He started blogging, and you know, this guy had so many failures in his life that he came up with something that's called the daily practice, and he has written a book about it now. It's called I Was Blind, But Now I See. You should have a look at it if you like it. Basically, the daily practices are 4 things, right? Be physically healthy. Very simple, but it's about breaking a sweat every day. I noticed this for myself. It really works. We're doing yoga. If every day you basically take your body to a point where you just, you know, where it's at its, you know, max tension, so you really exercise it, over time you become really good at at all the other functions that you have. The physical exercise makes sense, right? Being mentally healthy, there's Einstein over there. He's reading a book. You could say that guy was probably so smart he didn't have to read books, but he was actually reading books, exercising that idea muscle. So being mentally healthy is very, very important. Not watch TV all day, for example. Emotionally healthy. This is something interesting. It took me a lot of time also to get used to this. Don't be with people that bring you down. Don't be with crappy people. It's very easy to get down if people say that you're shit, but hey, that's their business, right? So have friends. And be spiritually healthy, thankful, which basically means, saying thank you. You can do it to God or to Jesus or to Krishna or to the Force, whatever. But it's really about saying thank you to the people around you. I started practicing this some time ago, actually myself. I started sending emails to people that I'm grateful to. Some of the people don't like me. Some people actually unfriend me on Facebook after I send those emails, but I'm really grateful for the good and for the bad experiences. And it really, thinking in these ways and training myself to be healthy in all kinds of various angles helps me deal better with data and become much more anal with, analyzing stuff, what's going on and, being very proactive with it. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Някой има ли въпроси?
Може и на български също, всъщност.
Може ли на български?
Да, може.
Значи, относно информацията. Значи, в момента е страшно лесно да се събере огромно количество информация. Мобилни телефони, Фейсбук, социални мрежи. Може ли да дадеш няколко съвета как да разграничиме реалната информация, полезната информация, като сложим, примерно, на някакъв анализ или през някакъв бизнес интелидженс се прекараме? Може ли някакво съвет?
Ама коя информация имате предвид?
Ами, добре, да речем, прави се някакво приложение, което събира информация от потребителите. Да речем, тяхно положение, behavior, така нататък и така нататък. Има огромно количество информация, терабайти. Значи може да се изкарат много изводи от нея. Може да се видят много различни шаблони. Но как мога да различим кой е полезен за бизнеса шаблон, кой е грешен за бизнеса шаблон?
Да, въпросът е какви са бенчмарки. Нали? Аз точно последно време много се интересувам от маркетинг, такъв data-driven маркетинг, като го наричат, където маркетинг не е въпрос на някакви приказки, които сега все още много го имаме. Аз бях, например, тук в София на Webit миналата седмица. Има страшно много маркетингови фирми, които не могат всъщност да обяснят какво правят и защо го правят. Става въпрос за някаква магия, нали? Че ние правим някакъв там копирайтинг, дизайн някакъв и хора са толкова удивени, въодушевени от каквото презентираме, че ще купуват вашето. Но не могат, например, да отговарят на много лесен въпрос. Аз ако слагам тук емблема на моята фирма, колко повече продажби ще има днес или утре? Тези неща всъщност се измерват, но трябва да... То е всъщност като Google Analytics, нали? За да разбираш conversion на вашия сайт, трябва да експериментираш с много benchmarks и funnels, преди да разбираш точно conversion process. Това е също с мобилната информация. Ако квалифицираш, нали, почваш от най-лесното, дали е бяло или червено, след това дали е бяло, ако е бяло, не знам, голямо ли или малко ли е, и изграждаш цяла система с бенчмарки, накрая ще разбереш. Ама той е всяка дневна работа. И колкото повече дата, толкова повече работа. Това е, мисля.
Аз имам един въпрос относно това последното, което коментирахме. Значи, как измерваме, примерно, полезността на лоялността на клиентите, примерно, или как се измерва така наречения ROI, който всяка фирма се интересува, когато става въпрос за маркетинг, когато говорим за социалните мрежи? Как се случва това нещо?
Това е много добър въпрос. Аз ако щях да знае това, щях да съм много богат и много успешен. Всъщност, той никой това не знае, но въпрос става за инструменти, които имаме, да измерваме тези неща. Нали, точно този пример на фирмата Uber е този пример. Те правят нещо с такси, един ап за диспетчери такси. Как може да измислиш, че има някаква връзка с статистика за престъпността? Няма как да го измислиш, просто трябва да пробваш. И те със сигурност са пробвали страшно много datasets от най-различни неща, статистика от полиция, там, може би от летищата, някаква информация. И накрая са разбрали, че да разбират къде има проституция в Сан-Франциско, помага им да правят по-голям conversion с такси. Така че аз мисля, че просто аз сам каквото правя с нещата, с които сам се занимавам, аз постоянно търся да намирам тези връзки и колкото повече дата има, например сега в България не е много лесно да намираш дата за какво ли да е, защото просто има много малко, дали за Google, например, почти няма дата за България, тя не е паблик, трябва сам да я измерваш. В Турция, например, много по-голям пазар, там си има много повече дата за самия пазар и там много по-лесно да анализираш нещата. Те са повече хора също, така че това. Мерси.
Някой друг? Добре, благодаря.
Мерси много.